Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. So today we're talking about HIPAA compliance. We're talking about what's changing, what may be changing, what has changed, kind of all of that stuff. But I am joined again by the incredible Yves Martin. He's a best-selling author. He's got an incredible company called MQual, and he is the technologist that I rely on for all compliance factors and really streamlining the way that I can rely on technology, both HIPAA related, cybersecurity related, you name it. He's my main go-to. So thank you, Yves, for joining us today.
Thank you, Brandon.
Well, as we jump into it, I guess my big thing is, why don't we just start with the landscape of HIPAA for like on a very just kind of simple way. I've always had this mindset that HIPAA, you're always out of compliance with HIPAA. It's just a matter of how much. And I mean that because I feel like it's almost impossible to guarantee 100% security of HIPAA, meaning like, depending on how you interpret something, I can go into the doctor's office and I can look on their screen because they don't have the screen protector on it or things like that. And so why don't you just like talk briefly about the state of HIPAA right now, where we're at, where we've come from, and like how accurate you think we can be in terms of prevention? Because for me, what I'm trying to accommodate or we'll just say prepare for is I want to make sure there's not gross negligence on my part. That's the number one thing. When I train in HIPAA, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but it's basically to show if I were ever audited or there was a breach, that I took every effort possible to protect patient health information. I took my courses, I got my certificate, I've invested in the right technology, I've taken effort, and so that there's not a gross negligence on my part. But why don't you inform us kind of from your perspective on kind of the state of affairs of HIPAA and what protection is really possible?
Sure. So, HIPAA, I like to approach HIPAA from its purpose, which I think everybody can agree with and actually want to have in place, right? So HIPAA is about protecting personal information, right? You don't want your healthcare information out there. You don't want your personal information out there. These are things that I believe that, we can all get behind. And I will say, that of government regulations, HIPAA is one of the more reasonable ones in terms of the fact that they really are sort of trying to, help private practices and help healthcare providers to do things that make sense, given the current landscape of electronic healthcare records and things like that. So the first thing is, I would say, don't hate HIPAA. Let's love HIPAA, right? So you are correct that, like almost any regulation, often there are just, things that make it very difficult. But it does seem like they're a little reasonable in terms of what's going on. And so, in speaking to your point that, number one, the main thing is you don't want to be negligent on this. Because if you do get an audit and you're found to be non-compliant and they determine that you've been negligent, it makes it a lot worse. So, they in past cases, it shows that they are reasonable in terms of the fact, like, all right, you were doing the training, you were doing this, you were doing that. And, somehow, an employee ignored the training that you gave them or whatever. Right. So, so from that regard, that's going to be a lot better for you, from an enforcement standpoint. So, now in terms of the landscape, there's a lot changing. There's some big changes to HIPAA that are potentially coming around, may have already potentially come out by the time that this podcast is made available. but they are pushing to change things that used to be sort of best effort, and they're changing that to becoming mandatory, or they may change it to become mandatory. And we may not know, we may already know that by the time this is out, or we may be knowing that by the end of the year at some point. But the point being, things like multi-factor authentication, which they were sort of like, well, if you can, then do it. But now it's looking like it may well become required. Encrypting information not only when you're moving it, when it's going from one place to another through email or something like that, it also needs to be encrypted when you have it stored on your machines locally. So that's another thing that that at this time is not yet mandatory, but might become mandatory.
That's a
Another
big
thing, which
thing.
actually I think is really good, is the biannual vulnerability scanning plus annual penetration testing. So, this sort of thing has become much more reasonable and available to get done for even a smaller private practice. We do things like this for, right around $1,000. And you do it for, what it'll do is it'll look through all your systems, looking for vulnerabilities that may be out there. It'll do some basic penetration testing to see if, like, do you have some holes in your firewall or something of that nature that need to be patched. And I think that this is a very good thing, because often a private practice will put in certain safeguards and say, all right, telling employees, hey, don't store passwords in your browser, don't do this and that, but every now and then that it gets out. And these vulnerability scans and these penetration tests will find that. They will find out, maybe a new employee came on, then they didn't know, and they started doing that, or they started saving stuff, or they started putting, protected health information, in their downloads folder or whatever. You can catch these things, and then you can do something about it. And plus, it also helps those employees know that it is going to be checked on. So they will be more careful as a result, sort of keeping honest people honest. I think most employees do want to protect the information. It's just accidentally things happen. And then there's different things like written technology asset inventory. So making, inventorying everything that you're using, and then taking a look at it and making sure that, that if it needs to be HIPAA compliant, it is. So these are different things that, right now are sort of part of HIPAA, but may become mandatory or may already be mandatory.
Well, and I think that's one thing. One thing you pointed out that I think we often forget is we don't think of what is being stored locally. We only think what's being stored in the cloud. And I think locally, there's a lot that can occur. I think the other thing that sometimes we don't recognize is when we're printing out face sheets for patients that can breach HIPAA depending on what's on that face sheet. Something that I've seen is most common, what I call stupid, simple breaches of HIPAA. Anyone that does any form of community-based care, going into the home health agencies, stuff like that, a lot of them are bringing some form of paper folder and they're leaving it in their car. Their car gets broken into, that chart gets stolen. Where you're locking it up, what your policies are. I know we've had it where we're like, you are not able to leave any patient health file basically unsecured. And your car is technically not secured. Someone could break the glass and get that. So how you deem security for that. And I'm only bringing this up because I totally get this idea of like, we should recognize the reason behind what we're trying to protect. We also need to recognize how simple we can keep something unprotected, how we get lazy with how we protect stuff. And even something like, I'm going to hold it up, the phone. How many of you are texting someone and being like, oh, I've got Jamie Seigel's evaluation today. Right off the bat, that text message was not. And you're like, well, is that really breaching HIPAA? And again, depending on if we're coining a name And if there's any connection of date of birth or, hey, diagnostically, I think Brandon's son is going for an autism diagnosis or whatever that may be. We have to think differently. And so I'm going to ask a question that you're not ready for. And so you could
Oh.
say, I prefer not to answer. But what if a family member exposes HIPAA and it's not us? So I'll give you an example. We're in a waiting room and you're a doctor. And I say, hey, Dr. Martin, I wanted to talk to you because my son, Jonah, he just had an ACL tear, blah, 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 blah. Right off the bat, in front of the whole waiting room, he's just exposed all of that patient health information. That's driven by a patient or family member. In those circumstances, that would not be considered a breach of HIPAA on our part, correct?
Correct, because the parent is not what would be considered an entity required to maintain HIPAA. So, you can, if you want, take your child's healthcare records and publish them online, I would suppose. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so don't do that. Maybe there's some other way that could be considered illegal. I'm just in terms of HIPAA. You're not considered, an entity that would be under HIPAA as a parent.
Yes.
Right. So, talking about that in the waiting room now, I would say hopefully that, as Dr. Martin, I would say, let's go back, and discuss that. Just again, when getting back to the purpose of HIPAA and, thinking to yourself, yeah, I don't want everybody to know all the different, whatever illnesses I might have or challenge or physical challenges I'm experiencing or whatever. This is not necessarily information that you want to broadcast.
Yeah.
And it definitely should be up to the person who has whatever is going on to broadcast it if they want to. So again, as a parent, obviously you have a lot of rights in terms of your children, but your child might not want that out there later on or whatever. So, I would say as a doctor, maybe say, let's go back and discuss. Let's have a room or where we don't discuss that out in the open.
Well, and you just brought up, in my opinion, the most important piece that often creates gross negligence. Just because a patient initiates disclosure of medical condition does not give you the right to discuss the medical condition in public. And so let's just say I go, Dr. Martin, Jonah did ACL tear, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean that now I'm authorizing Dr. Martin to say, well, we really need to do a surgery, but to be honest, Jonah's overweight and I can't justify doing like that. Doesn't give Dr. Martin the right to now share my dirty business in front of everyone. So I'm just bringing it to the perspective of sometimes we think that their disclosure is an invitation for us to disclose their patient health information, and that is not the case. So I love that you brought up in this kind of role play, hey, let's go back to my office. Let's further discuss this in a place where I can be more open with you, because at this time, I am not at liberty to disclose in front of this audience the information that we need to discuss. So love that. And I appreciate that. I guess my next thing for you and what I'd love to know is like, is there a way to quote unquote conduct a proper security risk assessment? Like what does risk assessment look like when it comes to HIPAA? Obviously, cybersecurity, there's its own thing. And I do know that, for us, HIPAA, it's a lot of education, it's a lot of training, it's a lot of checklists and preventative measures, but I don't know if I feel I'm in knowledge of an appropriate scan or assessment that's available from a HIPAA standpoint. Obviously, I guess you can scan technology risk and stuff like that, but why don't you talk to some of the ways we may do simple assessments or different scans or things that we can do to explore our risk with HIPAA?
Sure. First of all, you need to know that you don't need to drop like 5 figures on a consultant every year to do this. We help small therapy practices, run solid defensible risk assessments for a fraction of what a big firm would charge. number one, you can start with the free resource that HHS already provides. They have a security risk assessment tool. You can just search for that HIPAA, security risk assessment tool. It'll come up. You'll be able to find it. And they keep that up to date, and it's guidance. It's not any sort of a fancy thing that's going to scan your network and come up with everything that's out or whatever. It's not going to do that, but it will walk you through the different things that you need to look at. And it is not only technology, right? That's not the only thing. And I harp on this a lot. Training is a big one. Repetitive training, because it really does start with establishing a philosophy, a culture in your office of keeping information private, right? That's not necessarily part of the assessment. I'm just making that point. But the assessment will go through, we'll walk you through, different things to look at. And, pretty much there's like some three steps really you're going to go through. You should inventory everything, your devices, your software, your vendor. Do you have anything on paper? Because that still applies. If you're keeping paper records, the HIPAA is not only about electronic information. It is, and that's the other thing. It's about information. So, do you have things on paper? Is it being protected? So you can go through, you can create a spreadsheet, and then just kind of put all the things down. You're looking for things where protected information might be stored or might be available. And then for each of the items that you have there, you can look at it and say, all right, well, what could go wrong with this? How likely is it that something would go wrong here? So for instance, I've got a bunch of paper records stored in the reception area of my office in an unlocked drawer, right? And, a patient, the receptionist is away, a patient's looking for like a tissue box or a garbage can or something, starts opening drawers, right? I mean, something as easy as that could happen. Or a child is in there, children are curious, they start to look at stuff. So, that's an example. And so you want to go through and say, again, what could go wrong? How likely is it? And how bad would it be? Right. And you can rate that low, medium to high. And then, you come up with a plan on how to protect the information. And again, the security risk assessment tool that is for free on the HHS website, I'm pretty sure that's where it is. They will walk you through the different things, and you can look through it and say, some of the things won't apply, but the best thing is to start there, go through, and then it's really simple. It's going to come down to a fair amount of, know what you have, know where that information is possibly being transmitted or stored. And then, taking a look at, in looking at that, like what could go wrong? How likely is it? How bad would it be? And then come up with a plan to protect the information.
Yeah. Yeah. What about any common ways that you're seeing private practices accidentally violate HIPAA and they don't even know it? I mean, I see it all the time. I can give my examples, but I'd love your examples too, just to see what are you finding? Like someone's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was violating HIPAA doing that.
Right. Well, I wanted to bring up an interesting one that has to do with substance abuse. So there is a new regulation that is in force right now that you need to update your patient privacy. So basically, the form that they sign when they come in, and you tell them how you're going to protect their information. And so there needs to be information in there about substance abuse related records, right? Now, a lot of providers are going to say, all right, well, listen, I don't deal with addiction treatment or anything like that. But what happens is that when you request records from other providers and referrals and that sort of thing, that information can come across unbeknownst to you. And as a result, that makes you subject to this. So easier is just to update your NPP, to be compliant, because this is a way that you wind up out of compliance and don't even know it, right? Because you weren't really looking for that information, you weren't expecting it, but it came to you anyway. And if it came to you, now you're subject to this. So, that is definitely one. That's sort of a recent one that has come about, because that regulation came into force it came into force in February of this year. So some people may not know that. They may not realize that they have to update that NPP. And as a result, they're out there being, out of compliance with HIPAA, and now they don't even know it. But, a lot of the other stuff is, obviously not encrypting information is a big one. Emailing stuff around and that sort of thing. So, but this new one is probably one that people haven't heard of and didn't even know that they needed to do anything about it.
Yeah, and just to kind of harp on what you just said about the email, because I think a lot of people don't understand. What I always hear is, well, Brandon, we're protected. I've got a BAA with Google. I'm good to go. And I go, well, first of all, did you customize your settings for security? Just because you have a BAA does not mean that you're fully protected. That's one thing. The
Right.
second thing is, when you have Google with the BAA, a lot of that has to do with the way that things are getting stored, not the way that things are being transmitted. So then you need an additional encryption process for the way that that document is getting transmitted. And I only bring it up because I see a lot of gross negligence where someone thinks just because they have a BAA, they're protected. I'm going to give a couple other examples. And if there's anything that you think is not a breach, say, Brandon, I disagree with you, okay? When you have medical records that are in physical format and they are in your office, and you have a third-party cleaning company and they can access those records when they are in the office after hours, that could be a breach of HIPAA, that they are not secured files that are from that component. Playing off that same component, when there is a patient that has a caregiver that is dropping off, or in any way connected to the patient, and that person has not been approved as a released information, you cannot give medical information to that person. So let's just say I have a caregiver that takes my mother-in-law to a doctor's practice, and that doctor is changing the medication for my mother-in-law, as an example. That doctor cannot give the medical information to the caregiver unless the caregiver is on the release form of who can receive that information. So they can't be like, oh, we just upped the dose and the this and the that and all those different things. These are things that you have to think about, because they are not an approved person to collect that information. These are easy little things that we don't even recognize. The nanny bringing your kid for therapy, and then you tell the nanny, oh, by the way, this is what we worked on, and I'm still seeing issues with the swallowing dysfunction, and I don't think the diet's in place. And then the mom's like, why did you tell my nanny that? Like, these
Right.
are things that are, and am I wrong in any of those examples? Just so.
I don't think so. And, obviously, these were things that would get battled out amongst lawyers. But I think it comes to the point of culture again. You want to have and you want to foster amongst your employees a culture of privacy with this information, right? And they should be suspicious of anything like, all right, somebody's coming in, it's not the patient, have we been authorized to give this person information? Do I have unlocked information? Again, that's speaking to the point of the cleaning person coming around, and again, is the risk really high that a cleaning person is going to want to even look at that or know that it's there? But the point being is that, if you foster the culture, and that way, your employees are constantly looking themselves for potential HIPAA breaches, because you're saying, look, we want to make sure we here at our organization, we take keeping patient information private very, very seriously. And I'd rather you err on the side of not giving somebody information who is supposed to get it versus giving somebody information who is not supposed to get it. And, if you foster that amongst your employees, you're going to go a long way to making sure that HIPAA compliance has certain specific things. But you're going to go a long way to, number one, making sure that you don't violate somebody's civil rights by giving away their protected information, which is all HIPAA is trying to do. So if you go with that purpose and you establish that culture in your organization, that makes a big difference. Obviously, you still need to do the assessments. You still need to do the other stuff. But, mostly all of that comes into play once a breach has happened. So you can get an audit without a breach happening.
Yep.
But, the best thing is just to, make sure everybody understands, keep this information private. So.
Well, and the last example I'm going to give, just because I got to beat the dead horse, I'm sorry, is water cooler talk.
Yeah.
Employees that talk about their patient census to people that shouldn't. So I'm going to give you a perfect example, and I've seen this happen. Therapist, again, we're going to pick on therapy right now. Therapist is at lunch hour, had a really tough day. Receptionist like, hey, Brandon, you look really frustrated and upset. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I just had this eval with Jason and found out that Jason's mom was a rape victim and a drug addict and all this stuff. And then the receptionist next time sees Jason's mom and is like, I just want to tell you how brave you are. I really related with your story. That receptionist should never have had that medical information. That was not in any way part of the care delivery. And so often do we utilize other people's stories to create conversation, and we are breaching HIPAA in that circumstance. So that's my last kind of, story, but I'm trying to illustrate for each and every one of you that we often don't prioritize the privacy of our patients the way that we need to, and we don't recognize the effect that we can create on others by doing what we do. And so any last minute kind of recommendations that you want to leave our audience with before we end off today?
So definitely do the HIPAA assessment and go through it. It'll take a little bit of time. It is something that you should do annually, but the first one that you do, you're gonna lay everything out, and you'll have that document. Do it every year, and that's going to go a long way. And then I know that I harp on a point, but establish a culture of privacy. Maybe hang some posters in the lunchroom if you have something like that, or the break room or whatever. Bring it up at periodically at your staff meetings. Remember, guys, hey, if you want to use HIPAA as the excuse, but also just saying, like, remember, privacy matters. So something, and maybe have a slogan or something. Maybe I should come up with a slogan and put it out there. I'm gonna think about that. But have something like that really sort of drives it home, and everybody's thinking with it. And it's going to go a long way, because these regulations change, they add stuff, they take stuff away. But if you have the culture and you understand the purpose and you're really thinking with that, it's going to go a long way to making sure that you're doing the right thing by your patients.
Awesome. Well, I thank you, Yves, for being part of this episode. Don't forget to check Yves out in MQual. Yves, how do we get in touch with you?
Well, you can go to our website. Our phone number is on there. Everything. You can look me up on LinkedIn. You'll see my face. I don't have the different picture or anything like that. My company is there, and definitely hit me up to connect. I love getting new connections and talking with people on LinkedIn. So it's fantastic there too.
Wonderful. And it will be in the show notes. And if you have trouble finding Yves and MQual, just reach out to me. You know how to get in touch with me, or through the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. We will connect you with the great MQual team. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Don't forget, like us, subscribe, write a review, share us with your other colleagues, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube, or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.